But joining us right now by phone is our good friend, attorney, political analyst, and Catholic speaker, Brent Haynes, to talk about the Supreme Court leak. Good morning to you, Brent Haynes.
Good morning, Joe.
Praise be to God. It's good to have you here. I saw this quote coming out of Justice Alito's draft that got leaked. Quote, even though the Constitution makes no mention of abortion, the court held that it confers a broad right to obtain one. It did not claim that American law or a common law had ever recognized such a right, and its survey of history ranged from the constitutionally irrelevant, and example, its discussion of abortion in antiquity, or to the plainly incorrect, example, its assertion that abortion was probably never a crime under the common law, close quote, Justice Alito. What do you make out of all of this, Brent Haynes?
Well, that quote that you just read, and apparently it is an official draft of an opinion from the Supreme Court, but that quote that you just read is just factually accurate. Even supporters of abortion, most famously the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, hero to the progressive left, and one of the champions of the feminist civil rights movement. I mean, that's how she made her name and got on the Supreme Court. Even she criticized Roe versus Wade. Famous Harvard law professor Lawrence Tribe criticized Roe versus Wade. It's been criticized by other liberals. Anybody, even people who are not lawyers, can read Roe versus Wade and see what it says. And the Alito opinion, draft opinion, points out criticisms that have been made against Roe since it was published. And they're just accurate. And in fact, you don't hear abortion advocates defending the opinion on the Roe opinion on the merits. Nobody ever goes in and says, no, the opinion is right, it's well-reasoned. Nobody says, yes, the history that it cites is correct. Nobody ever says that. Mm-hmm. They just argue for abortion in principle. They assume their conclusion. And the Alito draft opinion simply goes through and basically reiterates the entire gamut of criticisms that have been leveled against Roe for about 50 years now. It says Roe was poorly reasoned. As you pointed out in that quote, it points out that contrary to what Roe said, abortion was generally a criminal offense historically. It also points out that there is no explicit right to abortion in the Constitution, which any fair-minded, objective person would admit. Significantly, and this is really where the legal reasoning comes in, it points out that there is no implied right to abortion in the Constitution according to our jurisprudential standards that says there are some implied rights, but they have to be rights that are firmly rooted in American tradition and are related to our ordered sense of liberty. Mm. So it's a well-reasoned, well-researched, documented draft. It could have been, in my judgment, it could have been even stronger. And who knows what the final opinion will be, one way or the other. But these are all criticisms of Roe that have been made for nearly 50 years, and they are all justified, and even honest abortion supporters have admitted that.
That's a great point. It seems to me that nobody really argues the point. And just like you said, they just kind of argue it in principle. Well, we need it. It's a right. It's a right. And there's really no other conversation besides that. Another Justice Roberts, he also mentioned in regard to the leak, he says that the document does not represent a decision by the court or the final position of any of the members on the issues in the case. When I saw this, I got really excited and I said, okay, well, it's done. We won. It's the end. Do you think that there's going to be a different draft after this? Do you think that this really is a victory, or what do you see? Obviously, this is just a draft opinion.
Well, as I understand the news reporting, and when the opinion was leaked with information that 5 justices have signed on to it. Also, the opinion is titled "The Opinion of the Court." Mm-hmm. So And it looks like, Chief Justice Roberts has affirmed its authenticity. So that means there's a majority who have signed on to it. But this is all tentative. Judges on the Supreme Court sometimes change their minds. The way the Supreme Court works is that the justices write opinions, they write letters to each other. There is something of a collaborative process at the Supreme Court. And sometimes justices on the court change their minds, especially on important cases. And when it's a close case, obviously that can change an opinion from being a majority opinion to a minority opinion. Sometimes, for example, the author of what should be the winning opinion or the majority opinion might write an opinion that is just too stark or too strong or takes, too extreme a position from the point of view of one of the members of the majority. And then that justice basically changes their mind and says, no, I'm not going to go that far. And they might go to the other side, or they might just write their own opinion. And all of a sudden, the author of the majority opinion is no longer writing the majority opinion anymore. Mm-hmm. This gets to the issue of why the leak of this opinion is a serious and devastating breach in our government and our entire governmental system. A lot of people just aren't going to appreciate that. This isn't a matter of just lawyers thinking that some law clerk has done something wrong. The United States Supreme Court, for more than 225 years, especially in modern history, has never had a leak of a draft opinion, at least before the opinion was issued and the decision was issued. The justices have to be free to discuss their opinions with each other. They have to be free to deliberate and argue and disagree with each other, and that's how they get their work done. They have to be able to do that freely. The best example we have as Catholics, for example, is when we as penitents go into the confessional, we want to be able to speak freely to the priest, and the priest and Holy Mother Church, and God wants us to speak freely. And if you have any sense that your confession would be made public, then, or what the priest tells you might be made public, then that's going to have, to use a legal phrase, a chilling effect on what you might say in the confessional, right? This is the same thing at the U.S. Supreme Court. Is now justices, in the future will be wondering, is what I write or say going to be leaked? Because now there's a precedent. Now, probably, they're still going to operate the same way. But this is a sign of more decay and disintegration in our society because it is an irredeemable, it's an irredeemable breach of one of the governing social norms of one of the critical institutions in our society. What are they going to do with the Supreme Court now in the future? Are they going to institute TSA airport-type security? I mean, are they going to examine law clerks? Because it was probably a law clerk. Are they going to examine law clerks and to make sure they don't take papers out of the Supreme Court? Are they going to make them empty their pockets and to make sure they're not carrying out flash drives with digital data hidden on them?
Go through their phones to see what they've taken pictures of with their camera
check
phones.
Their shoes.
Well, let me ask you this, Brent Haynes. A former Attorney General Barr, in an interview with Megyn Kelly, said, quote, "I think the chief would have had the option, and perhaps he still will, to appoint special counsel, not in the classical criminal sense, but the court can appoint a counsel, and he could bring in a former U.S. attorney or someone with a criminal law background, and I'm sure he would get the support he needed from the FBI or any other law enforcement agency." He goes on to say, "It could be obstructing the administration of justice, the due process of justice. Obstruction means you're attempting to influence, through some kind of wrongdoing," close quote, former Attorney General Barr. So the question is there a crime that has been committed here? Is it a crime to release these documents, or is it just bad ethics?
Well, different legal scholars, including former U.S. attorneys, have spoken on this in the brief time since the leak. there's disagreement. Some say there isn't. My own legal judgment is, having worked with federal statutes in a prosecutorial sense a little bit myself, my own sense is that if you look far and wide enough, you're going to find a statute. For one thing, it could be misappropriation of federal property. Former Andy McCarthy, a former federal prosecutor, has said it could be fraud or embezzlement. Yes, it could possibly be obstruction of justice. But regardless, an important thing to remember here is, even if this person gets caught, and there's no guarantee they will, that could go either way. But if the leaker gets caught, there's no guarantee that they're not going to go to jail. Now, there's not even a guarantee they won't eventually be licensed as a U.S. attorney. Remember, the FBI lawyer who lied, who doctored an email to completely change its meaning 180 degrees, was prosecuted, was suspended temporarily by the bar, and is now a licensed lawyer again.
Wow.
So this was a lawyer who committed essentially a political crime. He committed what in the law is called a crime of moral turpitude, one that goes to one's honesty. Normally, if a lawyer commits a crime of moral turpitude, they lose their license, and that's it, because lawyers are entrusted with such sensitive matters. So if the leaker at the U.S. Supreme Court is caught, sure, they might not be licensed to become a lawyer. They're not going to go to prison or jail. Even if they did, it would be for a very, very brief time. But here's the larger point. They're already being hailed as a hero. They're already being hailed as a hero. The Ian Millhiser, who is it was an editor at Think Progress, he's already come out and hailed them as a hero. He said, the abortion. He said that the U.S. Supreme Court is an irredeemable institution, and hailed this person as a hero. So if the leaker is found out, they will have a career as a celebrity advocate, even if they don't have a career as a licensed legal advocate to be a lawyer. They'll get speaking engagements.
Sure.
They can make their money that way. They'll do radio appearances. They'll become a media star.
But nonetheless, if I were Justice Roberts, I'd find the culprit and hang him out to dry, because it's a dangerous precedent, as Senator Mark Rubio pointed out. The next time you hear the far left preaching about how they are fighting to preserve our republic's institutions and norms, remember how they leaked a Supreme Court opinion. Attorney Brent Haynes speaking at the Cathedral of Our Lady of Walsingham this weekend on religious liberty. Check it out on their website. God bless you, Brent. We'll be right back.